And the sage also replied to them that he too had heard from the king that it is possible to extract someone who has fallen into any craving, but from the desire of money it is impossible to extract, other than by the way that there is to the sword, as mentioned. The sage said he too would go with them, and all four of them went along, and the gods, the wealthy ones of the country, went with them too. They came to a certain country, and they also asked the watchman, "What sort of country is this, and who is your king?" They answered them, inasmuch as there had been the storm wind, the people of this country chose for themselves then that the main purpose is speech. They took up an eloquent talker as a king. Later they found an extremely superb bard and orator. They accepted him as a king because the king relinquished the kingdom to him because he is so eloquent. They realized this surely must be our king's orator. They also asked if it were possible to be granted an audience with the king. They answered them, "We must announce it." They announced it, and he ordered that they should come in. They entered to the king, and it was the king's orator. They recognized each other, and there was also great rejoicing and weeping between them. The orator also went with them, and they went further in search. Maybe they would find the rest of them, for they saw that Hashem Yisbarach was helping them, so that they repeatedly find their friends. And they attributed all this to the merit of their kosher prayer leader, who was always praying for this. And through his prayers, they were privileged to always find their friends. They went onward. Maybe they will additionally find the others. They went and came to a certain country, and they also asked, "What sort of country is this? And who is your king?" They answered them that they are of the faction that had chosen for itself that the main goal is to go drunk and be happy. They had taken up for themselves some drunkard as a king because he is always happy. But later they found a man sitting in an ocean of wine, and they were very much more pleased with him because this is certainly a very big drunkard, for he is seated in a sea of wine. They took him up as a king. They also asked for an audience with him, and the guards went and announced it. They went into a king, and this was the king's beautiful, faithful friend, who had been sitting in the sea of wine that had come about from the talk of the orator who consoles them, as mentioned. And the countryman figured that he is a great drunk since he sits in a sea of wine. So they took him up as a king. When they went into him, they recognized each other, and there was great rejoicing and weeping with them as before. And the faithful friend went with them as well. They went onward and came to a certain country. They asked the watchman, "Who is your king?" They answered that their king is a beautiful woman, insofar as she leads to the goal, because the goal is habitation of the world, that the world should be inhabited with people, as mentioned. And initially they had a beautiful woman as a queen. Then they found a beauty who is a very exceptional beauty. They accepted her as a queen. They realized this must surely be the queen's daughter. They also asked for an audience with her, and they went and announced, and they entered into the queen and recognized that this is the queen's daughter herself. And the rejoicing that was there is certainly unimaginable. They asked, how have you come here? She told them that After the storm wind happened and had snatched away the dear boy, the child, out of the crib as mentioned, immediately in that frantic moment, she ran after the child but did not find him. The milk pressured her, and from this the sea of milk came about. Then the country found her and accepted her as king over them. And there was a great celebration there. But they also wept abundantly over the dear boy, the child who was not there, and over her father and mother, whom she, the queen's daughter, doesn't know of their well-being. But now already the country has a king too, because the husband of the queen's daughter, who had become queen here, is already here. For the warrior himself is her husband. So now the country had a king. The queen's daughter asked the prayer leader, for the time being, to go in her country and purify them a little. Meanwhile, of their repulsive vice, because since for them the main purpose was a beautiful woman, they were certainly very defiled and deep in their lust. Therefore she asked the prayer leader to meanwhile go purify them of it. In the meantime, he should tell them Musar, so they should not be so deep in the craving of promiscuity, so that they should not be so crude in this vice, because beyond it being a craving, moreover, it was like a faith for them. And this is the goal, because all the factions that had each chosen its bad thing as the purpose, as mentioned, each of them, the objective was just as a creed, that this is the purpose. Therefore, she asked the prayer leader to go and purify them a little in the meantime. Afterwards, they all went searching for the others. They went and came to a certain country, and also asked, "Who is your king?" They answered them that their king is a 1-year-old. For they are from the faction that had chosen for themselves that whoever has an abundance of food and is not nourished from what other people eat, he should be made a king. They temporarily accepted a wealthy man as king. Then they found a man who was sitting in a sea of milk, and they were exceptionally pleased with him, because this man was nourished his whole life from milk, and was not nourished from what other people eat. Therefore they took him up as king, and for the reason he is called a 1-year-old, since he lives on milk like a 1-year-old. And they realized that this is surely their child. They requested an audience with him, and they went and announced. They entered into him, and they recognized each other, for he also recognized them, even though he was only a little child when he was snatched away. Nevertheless, because he was a mature sage since his birth, since he was born with great wisdom as mentioned, therefore he recognized them, and they, of course, recognized him. There was certainly a very great celebration there, albeit they still wept that they did not know of the king and the queen. And they asked him, "How did you get there?"